News Radio 700 WLW.
More than 2,000 people have been arrested at pro-Palestinian protests at colleges across the United States over the course of the last couple of weeks. At UCLA a couple of nights ago, 210 people were arrested. That's when officers came in and cleared out an encampment. In New York, officials in that city, political and police and otherwise, say that a significant number of people arrested this week at these campus demonstrations were not affiliated with the schools. Nearly 30% of the people arrested at Columbia were unaffiliated with Columbia, and 60% of the arrests at City College in New York involved people who were not affiliated with that school. The DA, one of them in New York, say that 46 people, those that are not, by the way, consumed with Donald Trump's Stormy Daniels, at least there's one DA that's not consumed with that in New York. A DA in New York said 46 people who were detained at Columbia have been charged with criminal trespass, 22 people detained at City College, arraigned on burglary and obstructing government administration. Where did this all emanate from? Was it parenting? Because we all know with each succeeding generation, parenting becomes a problem for various reasons. The number of parents in the home, because of the way those particular parents were parented. Is it parenting? Is it college professors who are tenured and can pretty much deliver any kind of blab they want to, fiery rhetoric or, hallucinating on this or that they can deliver to their fertile minds that are there to educate? Is it college presidents who don't have, let's just say, the strength in their knees to deal with these things when they begin, as opposed to letting them fester and then negotiating with people who are trespassing in buildings, in some cases that you and I pay for as taxpayers? Just wondering. And inhibiting students who are there to learn from doing just that. Standing by is someone who teaches. He teaches criminology. In fact, he heads up the criminology department at Tarleton State University in Texas. He is also a former law enforcement official with a long and distinguished resume. And when all of this festered this week, there was only one person I wanted to turn to, and he is Dr. Alex Del Carmen. And he's standing by to join us right now to weigh in on this, give his thoughts, and find out exactly where to place the blame for all of this. And Dr. Del Carmen, how are you on this glorious Saturday?
I'm doing great, Ken. Thanks for having me.
I'm glad you're here. Look, I blame this, what we're seeing across campuses, not all campuses, because peaceful protesting is all part of what America is all about. We may not like what the other person says, but we should defend his or her right to say it. It's when it turns to violence that's it's a problem. And it has in places like New York City with Columbia and other locales, UCLA in California. I blamed the people that run these schools, the people that run these colleges for this turning to violence. I think these are weak-kneed people, some of which, if not all, have never worked in the real world and don't understand how the real world works. They're simply academia, and they spend their whole life in that incubated bubble. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, what's really sad about what's going on right now is that here we go once again with the First Amendment, right? And that wonderful aspect of our Constitution that allows us to voice our concern and displeasure over an issue that now has been hijacked, right? It has been hijacked by folks that really are ill-intended. They want to destroy property. They want to get in the way of other kids going to school, particularly Jewish individuals. I mean, it's really, really sad that, it's almost that they're trying to really destroy our Constitution from within. And as you noted in your question, I'm a firm believer that people should definitely exercise their freedom of expression, for that is what makes us uniquely different from other countries, right? But at the same time, it is different from expressing your views to going out there and destroying property and impeding somebody's educational process.
And threatening people. You simply can't threaten somebody, particularly if you're on public property or if you're in a private institution. It should not be tolerated by those who endow that private institution. You just can't walk around threatening people. My God, if I were to come to Texas, which I would never do, to your office and threaten you, truthfully, I would expect to be arrested by the campus police at Tarleton State University. You can't do those kinds of things, Doctor.
Right, and at the same time, not only providing a threat, but also having the ability to carry it out, right? Because, I mean, we can all talk about, threatening people, and that in itself is a crime, but no doubt. But at the same time, it becomes even a more severe crime if you have the ability to carry it out and you're preparing to carry it out, right? So people just don't understand sometimes that, because they think this is an issue of a constitutional premise on the First Amendment, and it really is not, right? So once you start destroying somebody's property, once you start occupying a certain location that impedes other people from getting across the campus, that's where the criminal intent and the criminal act takes place, and that's where law enforcement have to be called in to essentially, tear that away and allow for normal business to come about. And if they want to protest, they can protest outside of the university or college.
Well, for example, let's just take what transpired this week at Columbia. There was a tent encampment on the grounds, and if indeed it was students that were in those tents or in that encampment, then I suppose you could make a case for, well, wait a minute, they're students, they're paying to go to school there, they can stay there, they can be in camp there. If they're outside people who are not from that school, there's a problem. The problem escalated when they basically invaded a building, student or otherwise, invaded a building and held not only people inside that building, allegedly hostage, but trespassed inside the building for things other than going there for educational purposes. I think that's where this thing escalated at Columbia University to a point where the police had to get involved. Agreed?
I agree, and then look, there's the aspect of the law first, right? That in other words, is the individual violating the law, yes or no? Is it a state law or is it a federal law that's being violated? So those are the first questions we have. Secondly, and perhaps equally important, is the individual violating university policy? So here you have a dichotomy of circumstances where you may have some students that are in fact camping out in the middle of the campus, and just because they're paying tuition, it doesn't mean that they're entitled to do that. If it violates university policy, it could be suspended and perhaps even kicked out of school. So there's that aspect of it. The other aspect of it is the people that are not paying tuition, that they come from the outside and they're partaking in this process, they're subject to state and federal laws that would impede for that to happen. So look, either way, whether it's internal or external, the act is prohibited because it is coming in the way of somebody's right.
Well, let's talk for a second then about the external forces at work here, the quote unquote outside agitators. The mayor of New York has said that was a mitigating factor in what we saw at Columbia this week. We're hearing the same things out of Los Angeles with regards to UCLA. In your experience, how much of that is fueled by outside agitation, or is all of this hate that we've seen on display this week, this fomenting of hate, how much of that is coming from within these schools, where it might be activist teachers, activist professors, or whatever it may be, are fomenting this hate, and now it's just spilling over to the people that they're allegedly educating? Where is the fault lying here?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of both, right? So universities and colleges, as you know, have been in many ways, the center of operation for many protests that we've had throughout the years and in our country, right? And some of them have been legitimately done, and some of them were necessary for, civil rights to actually kick in and take place. But at the same time, when you look back at what's going on right now, law enforcement has the evidence in social media to suggest that there are external forces. Some of them, I would even argue, are probably coming from outside the United States in terms of their influence, their agitation through social media, rather, that they're getting a lot of these kids excited about things that they don't even know why they're protesting. And in some other cases, they're supplying some of the local activists that are simply going to show up for the sake of showing up, regardless of the issue.
Yeah, I think if they, and again, I don't have the tools that hopefully the FBI has and uses. I think if you had those, you might find that there are the same players on the East Coast as they are on the West Coast, and that there's great communication in and without. I would guess, with regards to outside agitation, Doctor, I would guess that there's great communication between those that are fomenting these things, and the identity of these people that are doing this. This is not something that should be a mystery to the FBI, should it?
No, not at all. And the FBI knows about it, and local law enforcement as well. Like I said, there's a digital print that many of these entities leave, whether it's through their cell phones or through social media per se. And of course, it's not illegal for people to organize a protest. What is illegal is when you start planning to engage in a criminal activity on campus or off campus that will then not only violate the law, but also come in the way of somebody's rights and jurisdictions. And so that's what I'm talking about, is the fact that in some cases, there have been many of these violations of the law. There's been even violence, that we have seen on campus on both sides of the spectrum. And I think all of those things need to be addressed. And I, look, I work with cops and I've worked with law enforcement for now 27 years, as you know, Ken. I do not envy their position, particularly those on campus that already have a hard job as it is, that now are going to have to secure the lives of those individuals on campus and off campus, be able to monitor outside influences, and then work with the administration to suspend or kick out some of these individuals that are clearly violating university policy.
I thought the police in New York City, watching that unfold the other night, I thought they reacted admirably. Would you agree?
I agree, and I think that, look, NYPD couldn't have happened to a better entity, right?
Yeah.
In the sense that it's one of our, we pride ourselves in the New York Police Department and some of the wonderful things that they've done historically. And so they have the ability, the equipment, the money, the technology, and the skill set to be able to handle this. But imagine this happening in small little towns in the middle of the United States, where the campus police is it's limited to 2 or 3 people, and local law enforcement doesn't have the wealth or ability to support that university law enforcement entity. That's where the challenge is going to happen.
And Doctor, I'm reading all kinds of things. You're probably reading this too. At Northwestern University, university officials have negotiated deals with the protesters. And this is where I have a serious disconnect. What are you negotiating? If they're actively taking over your building and impeding other students' rights to an education, what are you negotiating? You need to go in there and clear it out, because the longer it goes on, the more difficult it's going to be. I have no idea who runs Northwestern University or what their particular philosophies are when it comes to world politics or whatnot, but I do know that you start negotiating with people that are on your campus that have been admitted to your school, in essence, invited to attend your school, certainly for a fee. You don't negotiate with those people. You go there and clear it out. I think that's where Columbia got into. I don't think anything in New York at Columbia escalates if the university took a stronger stand from the start and said, get out, or we're coming in to get you out. But the longer it goes on, the more you negotiate, the worse it gets, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And the other part is that once you establish that quote-unquote negotiation component, then, when are they going to stop, right, demanding things? And some of their demands are not things that necessarily universities or colleges can, in fact, do, because, they're demanding for foreign policy to change in the United States. how's a university president going to impact that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or for the university to quit dealing with sponsored, organizations that somehow fund Israel. Well, if you belong to a university system, if you belong to a system that tells you who your vendors are going to be, how can you even influence that? And so there's a lot of naivete that goes on. And I've always believed generally that, always coming to terms with people is great. But at the same time, negotiating with people that are asking for things that you cannot even deliver, and even if you could deliver, you set the precedence for them to continue to ask more. Right. It's a bad idea.
Right. Dr. Alex Del Carmen, our guest, we're talking about what has transpired this week on various college campuses where peaceful protest has degenerated into chaos and violence. Look, to my knowledge, and you might have information that I don't, to my knowledge, no one has been killed this week. There have been people that have been arrested. Some have been injured. this might be a cheap lesson for a lot of universities across the country. We're moving now into the summer months. Schools are closing. The vast majority of students are dispersing for the summer, but they will be back in August and in some cases as late as September. What are these universities ought to be doing in this quote-unquote off-season, Doctor, that might help them deal with this a little better when the new school year begins in the fall?
Well, first of all, I worry about graduations, Ken, and they're coming up, right? In some cases next week, in some other cases a month away. Graduations where you have parents, when you have people from foreign entities that attend to be guest speakers, these are going to be definitely the right, quote unquote, right forum for some of these protesters to engage, and that worries me. Secondly, the summer months, even though they are slower academically speaking, we do have a large population of students that do go to summer school. And so it doesn't necessarily mean that kids all go away and they come back in the fall. And then thirdly, remember that some of these are, as you noted earlier, they're coming from different parts of the country. So they're highly mobile, they're organized. And so they, just because the students are not going to be there per se, it doesn't mean that the activists won't show up.
Yeah. I hearken back a lot to what the University of Florida president said, or what he said through his spokesperson, and that is, this is a university, not a daycare center, and understand that this is what you're here to do, which is learn and then go out into the world and be good citizens. But Dr. Del Carmen, I always love having you on. I know it's been a busy time for you. You take care of those young minds down there at Tarleton State, and you and I will visit down the road. Take care, Doctor.
That sounds great. Thanks for having me, Ken.
You bet.